everyone. My name is Ose Ekore. I'm a curator and a librarian, and I'm the curator of the current show on view here at FEA Gallery, Time Heals Just Not Quick Enough. And I am joined today by Abeer Sultan, who is a Saudi artist, also featured in the exhibition, and we're gonna have a conversation today. Thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoy the talk, and feel free to ask any questions you might have for me, for Abeer, and yeah, before we get started, Abeer, could you just give a brief introduction?
Yes, my name is Abeer Sultan. I'm a Saudi artist who is mostly tackling memory, migration, and the idea of personal history. So I do a lot of video work, as you have seen outside with the shells, and I do have the collage piece. So my work is multidisciplinary, and I'm constantly expanding. And yeah, like I also do curation, curatorial practices, and all of these things. So yeah, that's my brief.
Okay, thank you. Agua Viva is described as a mythopoetic world. Could you begin by sharing how you approached weaving together personal history, marine life, and migration into this symbolic landscape?
Yes. So as I a third generation immigrant, my family came from different sides of the world, but from my father's side, they came from Nigeria back in the early 1930s, sorry. So that's been a long history that was really hard to trace back, because I've been trying to situate myself within the culture of being in Saudi, but at the same time, it always felt like I need to speak about something, and I need to speak also about myself personally. But I still hadn't found the language to articulate it. And with Agua Viva, it was that investigation where is the place I can imagine myself to be, and if it's the sea, then that's the most. It is the essence of being, and my relation to the Red Sea is very intimate, because also my family lived in Hijaz before they moved to Riyadh. So I always reflected on how it made me feel. There's some sort of way that, let's say, the fragments of the corals, the fragments of the seaweed, or the fragments of generally the sea, that the wave crashes back and rejoin it on the surface, which is fascinating to me, collecting these pieces in some ways.
Thank you. And to speak more on fragments of the sea, the jellyfish, corals, and shells appear throughout the work as fragile but regenerative organisms. Was there anything specific that drew you to these forms as vessels for ancestral memory?
Yeah. I guess it's also being fascinated by their organic shape, by their movement, and how they move around water. But specifically with the jellyfish, it is the immortal jellyfish, which is the fish that is scientifically really hard to die, and it's been here for ages. And the thing about it, it's super small. It's 4.5 millimeter, and it has the power to differentiate itself constantly. So whenever it's starving or almost dying, it has the ability to regenerate, because it's also small. But I like that idea of insignificant being so significant. And in a lot of my practice, there is also the tiny, tiny things. Like I've previously done a work about ants and colonies. And like ant being this hidden creature that is weaving its own history and maybe also our history. So yeah, I like tiny things.
And how do these recurring motifs help you to articulate things that resist being said directly?
I think also it is building upon these fragments, which is also, I cannot give a completed story, and it is only, it's almost like a language that I have to invent, but also use fiction as my tool. So the hidden is because it's also not specifically accurate, almost, because I'm not showing something completed. I'm just showing a continuation of a story that might never end, and might someone actually I will pass it to someone and someone will continue it later on. So yeah, I like the idea of hiding and then taking these tiny things to light in some way.
Yeah, and I think like a good parallel between Agua Viva and the exhibition as a whole, I guess, is the idea of healing as a slow, submerged process that resists articulation. How do you see art's role in, or your work's role in making space for invisible or inaudible forms of recovery?
Yeah. I think there's two ways of practice, art making and also exhibition making, which is the place that we're in. And I think the exhibition is placing the work in relation to other, which is like the bigger context of it all. And you did a good job. So it's also someone else is interpreting your work and you are almost being looked at. This is the time when it's like you're looking at yourself and then being looked at, because display and exhibition and lights and all of these designs incorporated. But also in a broader sense, it's when, personally for me, when I'm like positioned around these work, it felt like less lonely, in a way, less alienating, which is so important. And with also my practice, this is like this things I'm trying to achieve is like get out of my shell and process thing in public in some ways. I mean, my work is not, let's say, it is emotional, but it's like emotional to me. I don't think I showed the emotional part, but I hope like it reaches somewhere. So bringing that sensory, this tangible, I think that's the process of healing, because you're bringing your emotion into space, whether it's an exhibition or, in your studio, both ways.
I think to me, like what you've just described sounds like a slow and like very intentional process. Do you think this slowness or refusal to be rushed itself can be a form of resistance in like just like current times as pertains to whether it's resisting the norm or whatever?
Yeah. I think, we have not witnessed how time has changed rapidly around these times, and time did get commodified in some ways, that it's so unnatural for us to live sometimes in a world that is so rushed and everything happening at once. So as much as like it is like fine to also, it's a hard balance, but as much as I can is to find that slowness within my process and the way of thinking, because I do a lot of research and like sit down on it, because I know the output would not be immediate. It's not that I've read something or felt something, it's going to be an artwork or a finished piece. That's why I like also the idea of a series where it's like maybe it's not completed yet, but also it is complete by itself, you know what I mean? Because yeah, like time could destroy you in some ways, but also build you, because it's so significant in our time.
Yeah, and I can't help, like, I keep looking at the book on your lap, so we'll touch on that. The series Agua Viva draws from Amy Césaire and Daphne Brooks, specifically the idea of embracing opacity as presence or strategic presence rather than absolute absence. How do you decide what remains visible and what remains hidden in your work? Yeah,
I mean, Amy Césaire is in this presentation. I like this photo a lot. Anyways, so I stumbled upon him very randomly in a bookshop, and I just picked up the book because I gravitated toward it immediately. And it took me a year to read it, actually. And then when I read it, I don't think I've felt this, I don't know, it's like it was this awe feeling of, the way that, because it's such a surreal language and lyrical language, but it has this tone of almost, it's a painful, it's like a painful experience, but it's so empowering at the end. And that when I just realized that poetry is such an impactful tactic, let's say, because sometimes you're trying to be metaphorical and abstract, but also you want to send or share a certain message. So with Amy Césaire, it was like just that abstraction was my way to go, but it's very real and potent. And with Daphne, because of opacity, the idea of like obscuring and not revealing everything, as a way of power, as a way of resistance as well. And where she also talks about Afro-alienation as a way of using, let's say, literature, performance, all of these things as a tactic to reorder oneself and take off actually almost the subjugation that you've like been through or like suffered, and treat it as also like a powerful tool of expression in some ways. So that's what also opacity brings in, I think.
That already kind of answered my next question. But I guess leaning into that, when I think of Afro-alienation, and I guess the idea of reclamation, of agency, something I think is important or worth noting is the importance of community, whatever form that takes shape. Yeah. in the context of Agua Viva, I think your relationship with Sumaya is a pretty cool example of that and that collaboration. How did the dialogue between you and Sumaya take shape, and how did it inform the current end results of Agua Viva?
Yes. So I met Sumaya like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I remember that feeling of like, this is the person, because we're both artists. So she was the person that I can talk to about certain subject that not necessarily everyone would understand. And we had this kinship in some way of like, being Black and also being in Saudi and trying to express ourselves in a way that is like authentic. And also that's why also this is the effort of tracing back history, is like bringing new language that is truly ours and not, copy and pasted, because that didn't work in the past. We just need to find this new way of living and understanding ourselves. And the way that I think how we speak in our environment is very, let's say, coded. I think that's the best way. And I like that also, because with the video work, it's about her and I having a conversation that no one could listen to. So she's reciting the poem, but I know the poem. Not everyone knows the poem. And that's when it felt, it's more like a secret, and a private secret that no one can know, just me and her.
That's pretty cool. And what does it mean for you to embed like these types of, I guess, these types of secrets in your work, and while also being both like author and subject in the work?
Yeah, I think putting myself full figure is no secret to anyone. But I think it's also having the immediacy of the self, because I'm always trying to find someone to take photograph, but I know that it's something I cannot explain to anyone. I have to do it myself. And that's also the idea of art making, is like doing it yourself. And I believe in being handcrafty in such ways. So me putting myself, and also Sumaya taking these photographs of me at the beginning, felt also a kinship between us, because it's me taking a video of her and then her taking a photo of me. And these also, in some ways, are a sequence of like a moving image. So it's almost the same medium we're talking about. So yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when you'd first sent. Actually, no, this was before that. When I was reading, I forget the name of the gallery where the work was shown before, but I was reading the description, and it had mentioned new cosmographies, and obviously learning more about the work. I thought it was really cool. The idea. I'm sorry. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Someone is shaking their head. But no, I was saying that when I was first learning about the work, I think Sumaya was actually the one that shared it with me, but I was reading up on it, and I remember the term like new cosmographies like stood out to me, and just that idea of, you know, creating your own map. I also happen to be like going down a weird like rabbit hole about people making maps and just very random.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. And I know you also describe the work as mapping new cosmographies that unsettle linear histories. Could you expand on how Agua Viva reimagines diasporic geographies of the Arab Peninsula?
Yes. Also, it's a tough question, by the way, because it's new cosmography and it's also cosmic anger. But at the same time, I think this is also a perfect picture to this conversation. So, also going back to literature and history, I felt like related to Antara bin Shaddad in some sort of way, because I remember seeing the series, and it's always like this black dude, and I don't know, he's like fighting, he's a poet, he's everything, and he's such a prominent figure till today, that when I revisited him, it felt like this epiphany. I'm like, I relate to him so much, actually, this mythical figure at some point, who has almost a fictional history, because every writer has something to say about him. Some people say he doesn't like being black, and some people say he loved it and it was his pride. So people also invented poetry along the way that it was allegedly written by him, which is sometimes not true. And I thought that was fascinating. It's like, even when I trace back history, it always have this fiction around it, and it's also the land that we're in, especially because also Antar bin Shaddad was in Saudi, basically. And his mother was Ethiopian, his father was from a tribe and like Arab tribe. So it just felt that these figures who are so prominent and celebrated in some ways, but also they have these boundaries of, let's say, celebrating them. So I think with Agua Viva is like bringing more figures into the landscape, and I don't know, building a colony or something. But you know, it's like, it's also the ants. But yeah, bringing them in back and having them to have a voice, and also visuals, because that is so rare to find, to see someone that is like Antara bin Shaddad. So yeah, I'm actually looking forward to continue that series with like other people and expand on it in a way that, yeah, I think it will be very exciting in the future.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think this is a bit of a sidebar, but when like learning more about your practice and like Agua Viva specifically, it opened up my world to this whole like matrix of West Africans that existed in Mecca specifically, because yeah, I thought it was very fascinating because like my mom is from northern Nigeria, and so my grandparents like went for Hajj, and you know, everyone I knew from like that part of Nigeria had like family, or they directly like went to Mecca, but like they came back. So I just always assumed that like everyone came back.
Yeah, they always came back.
Yeah, but so it was a bit mind blowing, like when I found out that there's a whole community that like has settled and now like exists there. with this series, Agua Viva, and I guess your broader practice, do you see it as work that is part of a larger attempt to chart overlooked connections across water, memory, migration?
Yeah. I think also, specifically when you mentioned the people who have settled in like Mecca, it's also hard to trace them and like what happened to them. But this photo I found in a book. It was the immigrant would, or like the pilgrimage. I don't think it's also, it's like, it's both everything at once, but the idea of creating huts and villages, that's something I've never seen before, and I can't imagine what type of life they had, that I think it's still resonating to them, like, but it's also not spoken to us directly. So there's so much that has been lived within the idea of migration that should be told in some ways. And I'm seeing a lot of research around the Red Sea, all of the pilgrimage, their songs are being documented. Everyone who have settled and is also speaking out in some ways, but it was always going back to water, you know. It is death and rebirth in some ways, because to me it's rebirth. When I went back to my research and trying to figure out all of these connections, it is that link that I'm trying to create, which is also the source of water, that is bringing. It's also the music of water, the dances between water. So it's almost, yeah, it's like it's so human to to pass through water. You have to pass through water at some point in your life. So yeah.
That leaves me with a lot to think about. No, I'm not even going to get into that. I want to talk a bit about knowledge, balancing knowledge and intuition. You frame the unseen and intuitive as valid forms of knowledge, whether it's within your practice when like charting history, or when transferring knowledge. We think about like folklore, we think about kids' stories, we think about fables. How do you cultivate intuition within your artistic practice as a tool?
I think I've always been an intuitive person. So it came naturally to me to like have this intuition. But in my art practice, it's more of like having it's not supernatural, but it's having some type of trust that is beyond me. Sometimes even when I don't believe in myself, I believe in the process of getting there at some point. So even when I research and even when I like go through anything like scientific and like very theoretical, I think I always try to bring that sensory feeling into it, and also bringing back time when that knowledge sinks in, because that does not happen within seconds or days. It has to take sometimes years for you to understand one subject. So I think when the time comes, it's just this feeling just directs you towards it immediately. So you never know, but it's also a ritual that you can cultivate within your daily life, whatever that makes you feel in tune with yourself. It is something worth considering and like putting back into your practice, putting back into your daily life. It's a whole life we're talking about, and that balance is kind of sometimes difficult to manage, especially talking about your work, because sometimes something is not specifically has the word to describe it. It's an intuition. It happened, and that's the way it is. It's still valid and relevant to the work, but that doesn't mean I have anything. I don't have concrete language behind it. Yeah, like specific parts of the process.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think sometimes like defining the definition usually comes like later. Like I found that like as I was like putting this show together, I spent a lot of time thinking about like very random things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only like as I got closer to, like finalizing like the works I wanted to be featured in the show, and thinking about when I started thinking about like the layout and all that, that was when like all these like random like thoughts started like making sense as a unit. I guess to wrap up my questions, and then I'll open it up to the audience. What kind of knowledge or feeling do you hope Agua Viva opens up for viewers, even if it resists words and resists definition?
To me, like my audience or my nieces, like I would seek their approval. But yeah, there are my nieces first and foremost. When I'm like thinking about the future, and also what to pass by, I want to have some sort of artifact for them to engage with and maybe reshape, and also any audience and any visitor who would see something or see themselves in the work, I would imagine it evolving and being better than it was. So that's what I guess that's the goal, that's the dream, is like people continuing the practice of self-expression, but also tackling subject that, let's say, to me, it's like my family and immigration and how that affected me, and also what led me to do art, I guess, at the end of it. So yeah, I hope like everyone at some point do that also as well, in their own way, in different times and space.
Amen.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? Tough crowd.
I can also read the poem.
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that. So this is the poem that the video piece was reciting. The secret I had with my friend, which is no longer a secret. It's fine. But it is the last page from this poetry book, and it's called Notebook of a Return to My Native Land, and it says, here we go. Come to my dances and may the sun jump on the raquet of my hands. But no, I will not be content with the unequal sun anymore. Wind, Coil yourself around my new growth, land on my measured fingers. I gave you my conscious and its rhythm of flesh. I gave you the fire where my weakness glows like ember. I gave you the chain gang, I gave you the swamp. I gave you the Anturas triangle circuit, devour, wind. I gave you my erupt words, devour, and coil around me. And coiling, embrace me with a wider shudder, embrace me into furious. We embrace us, but also having bitten us, bitten to the blood of our blood. Embrace my purity will bound with your purity alone, but then embrace, like a field of wise feelers, in the evening, our multicolored purities. And bind me without remorse, bind me with your vast arm to the luminous clay. Bind my black vibration to the very navel of the world. Bind me, bitter brotherhood. Then strangle me with your lasso of stars. Rise, dove, rise, rise, rise. I follow you imprinted on my ancestral white corona. Rise, sky liquor, and the great black hole where I wanted to drone a moon ago. This is where I now want to fish the night's malevolent tongue in its immobile revolution. That's the last.
Well, yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you so much to Abeer for making the time to come all the way from Saudi and be with us. Thank you for sharing more about your practice, and thank you for even engaging in your practice in the first place. Thank you to FEA Gallery for hosting this, and taking the time out to put this all together. Thank you all for coming again, and we're around, so if you have any questions about Abeer's practice or work or the show in general, please feel free to ask us. And yeah, thank you.